heavy toll in terms of finances if you are not able to get everything at the hospital or at the clinic. So it means that there are going to be a lot of out-of-pocket expenses. Families, you may need to buy your insulin or your insulin pen set, because sometimes in the government hospitals, you don't get the insulin as a pen set, you get it as a syringe, and it becomes harder for children and families. So sometimes they also don't have those important things. They lack monitoring devices. You know how difficult it is for a young child, let's say 6 and 7, to be pricked 4 or 5 times to check their glucose every day. I think that really reduces the quality of life. And these children tend to get very, they tend to struggle very early on with these pricks. So sometimes you don't have those little nice lancets. We don't have glucose sensors that you can strap on the skin and remove after 3 days. Those things are really causing poor quality of life for our diabetic children. I'm looking for the day when we really are going to be looking forward to sensors, when you reduce the number of pricks. We are going to have pumps for children and families, and they know how to use them. And the diabetes then becomes something that you can live with easier than it is right now.
This is great. And the conclusion that I've drawn from this is that misconception has become the main obstacle, and hence we're having poor quality of lives for people that are living with diabetes today, regardless of them taking their medication. So the main obstacle is the misconception that people have that could even lead people to neglect their medication, saying that we went to church, we were prayed for, so we are no longer taking our medication. This is really happening. So thank you so much for this. For now, with regards to diabetes screening, maybe you could share with the audience to say how beneficial it is if diabetes is diagnosed earlier, and a little bit about how DKA is of concern in the case of late diagnosis. What can you say about this?
I think what we know now is that we need to do pre-screening. It's not really waiting for you to get diabetes. It's really pre-screening. If you have a family history of diabetes, there are relatives in your family with type 1 or type 2, you need to be screened for diabetes, knowing about those classic symptoms that I was talking about. If your child is passing a lot of urine excessively, they are very thirsty, they are waking up to drink water, they are eating a lot more than usual, but they are not gaining weight, they're actually losing weight, or your child who was previously toilet trained starts bedwetting. Those are classic symptoms. It's better to present earlier so that you are checked rather than waiting until this child presents with diabetic ketoacidosis when they are very sick and at high risk of dying. So you'd really, even before you get symptoms, if you've got a family history, if there's someone else in your family who's diabetes, it's important to check your children for diabetes. It's important to test, to check for those symptoms. It's important to be able to then prevent, serious complications from happening. And so pre-screening is really an important tool that we can actually use. There's nothing wrong with every year you just go and get your blood check done once a year and just make sure that, your child is fine. You're fine as well.
Thank you so much, Doc. I mean, this will be helpful because now considering the fact that over 530 million people today are living with diabetes, and it is often said that in Africa, more than 70% of people in Africa are living with diabetes that is undiagnosed. So that means to say they do not know, but they are living with it. So which is a great concern as it is today. So now, Doc, maybe the next question would be to say what you could recommend maybe to passionate advocates like myself who are involved in diabetes screening with the access to finger pricks. People are doing this in the communities, they're testing people. So, and I've read in recent studies and that it is being discouraged only for diagnostic criteria for all types of diabetes to be based on laboratory measurement, and not meaning to say that using the finger pricks is being discouraged, but they will now favor the laboratory measurements to be the only basis for diagnosis. I don't know what you could recommend to people who are also doing this.
Okay. So for screening purposes, it's important to make sure that you can, you screen a large number of people. If we look in our setting, it's difficult for everybody to go for a formal blood test. So a screening tool has the disadvantages. So yes, we know that there may be differences between your prick, your skin prick versus your whole blood that's taken to the lab. There are slight differences when it comes to your glucose level. But for screening purposes, it's important to do those screens because they are fast, they are easy, and you get your results there and then. Different from when you're waiting for a blood test, you take it to the lab and then they're going to tell you, oh, come back tomorrow, and it becomes very expensive. So for screening purposes, screen your skin pricks. Check for the classic symptoms of diabetes. Check for a family history of diabetes. Use those things to boost your screening protocol. Also, make sure that you know about your fasting blood glucose versus your random blood glucose or your skin prick. If you're fasting skin prick and someone has not eaten for 8 hours and it's more than 7, this is the patient that you want. It's more than or equal to 7. This would be the patient you want to send for your random sugar, where you just check whether you've eaten or not is 11 or greater. Again, that's a person that you are at high risk of getting diabetes. So it's important for you to be able to know those levels and to say, okay, I'm going to check for a history of diabetes. I'm going to check for symptoms of diabetes. And then you just screen quite a large number of people. And then from that, you pick those ones that may be at risk, and then you send them for formal testing. But screening remains very important. It's the easiest way that you can actually help to make the diet. Doing a good job.
Thank you for this talk. This is amazing. And yes, people should, this now gives everybody, to the audience, to say they should know the main symptoms of diabetes, which are increased thirst, frequent urination, loss of weight. They should be able to read this when they present themselves. And when they go for a random checkup, when they got such numbers, then they should be recommended to go for further testing in the lab, which is great. Thank you so much for this. So this means that you're encouraging screening at a large scale, which is great. The next question, Doc, I think now we are probably maybe focusing more on the children, especially the children care, even at school, because it is often say that children or people, maybe the adolescents, they spend most of their time at school. So now we are really concerned about this. So, and there are often so many position statements from many international organizations, especially those that deal with diabetes. They recognize that students living with diabetes, they face a wide variation in resources and circumstances, considering where you come from, etc. How then can schools uphold the students' rights to safely attend school while enabling the student to experience equal opportunities and obtaining equal education and participating equally in activities with other peers?
Our children spend most of their time in school. So it's really important for us to be able to speak to the schools, to be able to make sure they also know that these children have got the right to education, and we need to help them so that they get that right. So the first thing is to really, I think there needs to be a lot of advocacy. There needs to be a lot of teaching in terms of how to look after a child with diabetes, and if they've got complications, how to address those complications. So maybe during all this, the teacher need to know about some of these chronic diseases and understand what could happen. What I found is that in some schools where you have got a teacher who's actually diabetic, it becomes so much easier for them to accommodate that child. But when you get to a school where no one knows anything about diabetes, it becomes very difficult. And they are so quick to say, oh, your child is sick, please come and take them. Or this child needs this and all that. So there needs to be a lot of education at those in different schools. We need to know the condition. We need to know how to manage it. We have to go to school with their glucometers, being able to check it at any time whenever they feel sick, or pre-meals, before they eat or before sport. It's important. So we need to know, the teacher also needs to know what a glucometer of 3 means, what a glucometer of 15 means. So we need to have, them knowing the normal ranges is between 4 and 10. Before exercise, it's important for the child to check their sugar. And if it's between 5 and 10, we are happy. If it's low, you allow the child to have a sandwich and then they can do this. We need to be talking about them. We need to have dedicated treatment centers for someone. For instance, if they are really feeling sick, they get a low sugar, for instance, there has to be maybe a nurse or a teacher who's trained to be able to administer first aid. We need to be able to allow them to have active participation in class and in sport. I'm going to underline sport, because most people think that children with diabetes shouldn't do sport. They should actually be encouraged to do sport, actually manage your sugar better if you are doing sport. So all those aspects are important, and it's really important for families to communicate with the school. My child is diabetic, my child has got insulin, this is an insulin pen or for a pen set, this is how much they take. My child has got a glucometer, and this is how we check, and these are the ranges. So we really need to be talking about that, allowing children to attend school, even boarding school, even, universities, whatever. They should be able to get the best out of the schooling experience.
Maybe give you the last, thank you so much for ironing on all these points. Lack of information would even teach us to say they should maybe deny so many other students who might have diabetes at school, and people would start to ask questions. Why is it you're not able to do this? And then they will seem like mentally it disturbs the students. They should not be denied these opportunities. So thank you for sharing that as a doctor and as an experienced person. If the parent suspects that their child may have diabetes, what can they do and where can they seek the services?
Yes, so we've been talking about making sure that you think about diabetes. That diabetes can happen. You should be able to look out for those screening tests that we're talking about. And if you do suspect that your child may be diabetic, maybe they are passing a lot of urine, they're very hungry, they are not gaining weight, they are thirsty and all that, it's important to visit your nearest clinic. Get the child checked. Get the child assessed, visit your doctor, visit the hospital, anywhere where you can actually get a blood test, then you can go there. The diagnosis of diabetes is relatively easy, because we look at those classic symptoms. We look in blood sugar, or we can even do a random sugar where, you can just walk in and we do your sugar there and then. But it would be good to have a fasting sugar where you haven't eaten for 8 hours, then we check your sugar. And then sometimes you also check the urine for things called ketones also. So it's important for you, if you do suspect your child has got diabetes, go to your nearest clinic, go to your nearest doctor, talk to them about what your child is going through, and then they can assess your child.
Great. Thank you so much, Doc, for this information, and thank you even for encouraging the audience, which is something that is very close to me, to say that everyone should, especially the people that have come in contact with me, they should not, this person has lost his or her life because he was diabetes, but he or she didn't know it. But then he or she was my friend. That would disturb me greatly, and I'll be affected. So thank you for encouraging the audience to get tested. If they suspect that if they have all these symptoms, then they should go for a proper checkup. So Doc, maybe the last question would be, maybe it's not a question, what would be your last words to the audience, people that are listening? They are caregivers, there are people living with diabetes, and so many significant others. What would be your last word?
I would like to thank you for this opportunity. I think we need to be talking a lot more about diabetes. It's something that's close to my heart and close to a lot of people's heart. We need to be talking about diabetes. We need to be advocating for better management of children with diabetes, because when you get a diagnosis of diabetes at the age of 4, you need to be looked after very well so that we prevent any complications. So I think we need to embrace children and families that have got diabetes. We need to support them the best way we can, and we need to be talking about it a bit more. Thank you, Tino.
A huge thanks to you, Doc. Thank you so much for your time, the incredible information, everything about it. A huge thanks to our guest for the dedication to the Diabetic Mogul Podcast, with a special peace offering to the audience. It should be noted that there are various types of diabetes, and diabetes is unique. Get screened, especially if you have a family history of diabetes. Let's come up together to correct the narrative. There is no known cure for diabetes yet. It should be noted also that knowing the classical symptoms of diabetes is key and beneficial. So do not forget to give feedback, share, subscribe to the Diabetic Mogul Podcast for more. And a huge thanks to our audience for your loyalty and for listening always. Thank you.